Virginia's 7th Congressional District. He's a Green Beret and Georgetown law grad. Derrick Anderson, thanks for joining us here on Breitbart News Saturday.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me, brother. How you doing?
Doing well. So you are we're having several retired Special Forces guys who are running for Congress on today. You're the first of many. And this is something we're seeing across America. So you served several tours overseas. I think I'm looking at your bio right now. 6 tours overseas. You served in Afghanistan, Iraq, several other Middle Eastern countries. So you literally put your life on the line. You're a Green Beret. What makes you decide? What makes you look at Washington, D.C. and what's happening right now in our government, in our political system, and say, you know what? I know I served my country before, but I got to go back. I got to go back and I got to serve again. Why? What draws a Special Forces guy like yourself into the political arena?
Yeah, Matt. So, I'll start off in the beginning. Last year I was not planning on running for office.
Mm-hmm.
I really wasn't. In August of 21, I was sitting back and watching the botched withdrawal in Afghanistan, and that was the catalyst for me. I lost 5 of my guys in Afghanistan. I lost 2 Green Berets and 3 infantrymen in Afghanistan, and I was sickened at the Biden administration's lack of accountability and lack of leadership during and since of the Afghan withdrawal. And I decided I wasn't going to sit back and scream at the TV anymore, or I was sick and tired of sitting on the sidelines. I mean, us special operators never sit on the sidelines. If you saw the raid in Syria recently, we're at the spearhead. And I think I decided that I was going to continue service to my country. And I think, Matt, this is a really interesting statistic for you. Right now, our Congress is comprised of 14% veterans. That is the lowest that it has ever been since the beginning of World War II.
It should, frankly, it should be north of 80% veterans. Personally, that's what I think. But
I think Mike Waltz, who just recently endorsed me, who's a great friend and another fellow Green Beret. Mike Waltz made a comment the other day. I think it was in the early or mid 70s. We had over 70+% veterans in Congress. So if it gives you any indicator of how angry and upset at how our government is being run right now, we have over a dozen Green Berets and Navy SEALs running for office. The Green Berets are one of our mottos is quiet professionals. And when you see those kind of people stepping up, you know that there's something wrong.
Yeah, and it's really cool. And I saw an ad recently. You mentioned all the Navy SEALs are we hear lots of those guys too. And later in the show, we're going to be joined by some other Special Forces guys. And we see the story of like Stu Scheller, right? Like the lieutenant colonel there who spoke out against all of this insanity. And then they railroaded the guy and they got rid of him rather than fixing the problems that he was speaking out against. And that story went absolutely bonkers and wild. But and now look, your opponent here in this race is Abigail Spanberger. She's a Democrat, and she portrays herself, and we've covered her a lot because we were very close with her predecessor, Dave Bratt. We did a lot of interviews with Dave Bratt, and she portrays herself as this moderate person who's willing to criticize the establishment, and she's tough on national security. I think none of those things are true regarding her. I've never seen Abigail Spanberger not vote for something that Nancy Pelosi ordered her to vote for. Never once. And she's been there for many years now. And so, I mean, the charade is up. The jig is up, right? Like, we could tell that it's a lie. But she hasn't done anything to hold Joe Biden accountable for what happened in Afghanistan, right? 13 servicemen and women were killed in that terrorist attack. That didn't need to happen. That wouldn't have happened had Joe Biden not handled it. So tell us about that. Like, when you see Abigail Spanberger not doing anything, she isn't doing anything for the people of Virginia. She isn't doing anything for the veterans. She isn't doing anything for the Americans. There's still Americans in Afghanistan who want to get out. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, Matt. So first and foremost, Abigail Spanberger votes in lockstep with Nancy Pelosi and AOC over 90% of the time, if that gives you any indicator, right? Yeah. And Spanberger has run on this misnomer. Well, specifically, she runs on 2 things. 1, her national security background, and 2, on this misnomer that she is what I like to call her a fake moderate and or an opportunist. And I'll tell you why, Matt. For the national security front, I'm the only person in our race that's going to be able to go toe-to-toe with Abigail Spanberger on national security issues. Like you mentioned earlier, I've got 6 deployments under my belt. I'm the only person in this race that stepped foot on Afghan and Iraq soil and heard shots fired in anger. No one else in our race can say that. Abigail Spanberger can't even say that. Secondly, she runs on that, what I mentioned. She's a fake moderate, and she's an opportunist. I'll give you a few examples, Matt. You'll find these interesting. Back in January of 2021, she was on, I think you remember, she was on that phone call with Nancy Pelosi that got leaked, where she said, enough with the defund the police, right?
Yep.
Well, what's interesting is not what she said then, is what she said after the fact. She didn't say it was because it's bad for our communities and makes them unsafe. She didn't say it was because it was denigrating the service of our men and women in blue. No. She said, I'm going to lose my seat in Congress. Because to her, this is a title. For her, it's a title that she puts around her belt, and she walks around the halls of Congress and tells everyone she's a member of Congress, not because she wants to serve the people in the district. I mean, I have skin in the game. My whole family lives in this district. My mother's lived here for over 30 years. I spent the first 20 years of my life in this district. So the next one, if you fast forward, and you mentioned it, you touched on it, Matt, in August of 2021, 2 days before the withdrawal was supposed to be complete, and the day that 13 U.S. service members were killed, then and only then did Spanberger come out and say, hey, I think there might be an issue with the withdrawal in Afghanistan. Fast forward yet again with the infrastructure bill. She waits 2+ weeks after every deadline passes for the infrastructure bill before she pens an op-ed in the Richmond Times and says, hey, there might be an issue with the infrastructure bill, and then votes for it. And then lastly, she waits 2 days after the election of Glenn Youngkin as the next governor of Virginia, and she goes to the New York Times and says, hey, President Biden, no one elected you to be FDR. No one elected you for your chaotic policies. But at no point during the Youngkin campaign did she stand up and say, hey, guess what? Parents do have a right in their kids' education. At no point did she step up to Biden or his FBI that were investigating parents for showing dissent at school board meetings. So, I mean, to your point, Matt, she's a political opportunist. She licks her finger, puts in the air, and tests the political headwinds before making any sort of decision, and she's not representing the people of the district the way they deserve.
Right. That was a fantastic breakdown of things. Now, all of those incidents, by the way, I've seen all of these things, and we cover them when they happen because I think it's illustrative of the Democrat Party's disarray. But I remember when she was talking about the whole defund the police thing. So she says that stuff, or she leaks it to the media, and then she doesn't do anything. Right, so then what does she vote for? She votes for the various Democrat pieces of legislation that defund the police, right? So then, the no FDR comment, right, that you weren't elected to be FDR, that she made to Biden. So she says that, and she leaks it to the New York Times. But then what does she do? She goes and votes for the quote-unquote Build Back Better bill when the Democrats take it in the Congress, right? So it's like, okay, she could say all of these things, but then her actions demonstrate that she is actually no different than Nancy Pelosi and AOC. I mean, that's what's so wild about this to me is that I look, I certainly hope that there maybe one day will possibly be some actually moderate Democrats that will go into their party and try to steer them back, because I'm a believer in competition. I hope that the Democrats make the Republicans better and the Republicans make the Democrats better. But the thing is that she's not doing any of that. Like, the only member I've seen, the only one, and I still think he needs to go, that has voted against them on stuff is the guy from up in Maine. But he's the only one that I've seen ever actually vote against any of their stuff. She doesn't. Her actions demonstrate that she, no matter what she says, it's what you say, it's what you do, not what you say.
Yeah, Matt, it's a great point. And I mean, just recently, this happened a couple of days ago. She voted to block a consideration of a bill that would reduce drug overdose deaths by scheduling fentanyl as a dangerous drug, right? She voted to prevent floor debate on legislation that would strengthen law enforcement's ability to prosecute fentanyl traffickers. I mean, those are pretty easy ones, right, Matt? I mean, my family was personally affected tremendously by the opioid epidemic. It's one of the reasons why I worked in the national drug control policy for a while. But And I mean, that's one example. I mean, look at what's going on with these mask mandates right now. The Democrats continue to politicize our children, essentially, right? And it's terrible. And, I'll give you a quick example, Matt. This is something that hits home to us in the district. But, we've seen all the mask mandate hysteria, specifically in Loudoun County. And now in our district specifically, we're seeing it. It's been going on since the Youngkin campaign, but it's continuous here in the district, specifically in Spotsylvania. One of my good friends, he has twins, right? And his twins were sitting at the cafeteria table when their teacher walked by, and the teacher said, "What's wrong, boys?" And they said, "We're hungry." And they said, "Really? Why are you guys hungry?" And they said, "The cafeteria lady, she won't serve us food because we're not wearing a mask." And so the teacher, thank goodness for her, walked the kids up and had a stern discussion with the cafeteria woman who would not serve the kids their food at first. And after a couple minutes of conversation, let's call it that, the kids got their food. But that's where we're at right now, Matt. We have the Democrats politicizing these mask mandates, and we have kids going hungry in school. It's absolutely horrible.
It's horrific. And by the way, that's not to mention the fact, kind of getting back to that theme of these special forces guys across the country. I mean, there's so many of you guys, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, et cetera, that are running for office. You look at what somebody like Colonel Scheller came out and said, right? Like, you look at what, we're hearing from the inside the military. I mean, look, they've turned the military woke, right? I mean, President Trump's talked about this. He comes out and he says, everything woke turns to, and we don't need to say the other word. But the point is that can you tell us what's happening on that front? Because they're decaying our society from the bottom up, from schools all the way through regular life and so on and so forth. But at the very most important thing, I mean, our country needs to be able to protect itself, and they're more interested in protecting transgenders than they are in stopping the Chinese Communist Party. And that's or they're more interested in critical race theory being taught across the military. You see General Milley talking about these books that he's reading and whatever, rather than, where's the plan for them to stop China? Like, they don't have a plan to stop China. They don't have a plan to stop the Taliban. I mean, pretty clearly, the Taliban took over. While this is all happening, we don't, our military has just totally been hollowed out. I mean, our whole society is hollowed out, right? Like, I mean, everything from, kids in school all the way up to through our ability to defend ourselves as a country.
Yeah. So, Matt, we just recently saw some leaked NSC reports. I think you might have seen them, that pretty much showed that the Biden administration was scrambling to put a plan together while Kabul was falling, right?
Yeah.
But at the same notion, you've got General Austin, or Secretary Austin now, in the Biden administration politicizing the military, right? Our military is not a social experiment. Our military has one mission and one mission only. That is defend our nation from our enemies, foreign and domestic, right? That is our job, whether it's training, whether it's deploying overseas. And I think it was just recently the DOD published this report talking about extremism in the military, right? And the report came out to show that less than 100 service members were classified as extremists, right? We have over 1 million service members in the military. So if you do the quick math, it's something like 0.0001. That means that 99.999% of our military is doing the right thing. They're patriots. They're people that are out there defending our country and doing God's work to make sure we're safe back here at home. But instead of applauding that, the secretary and the Biden administration is politicizing the military. And if that gives you any kind of idea, imagine being that service member, that soldier, sailor, Marine, overseas in Kuwait or Syria or where have you, and they're watching AFN and they're watching the news, and all that's being publicized is our military is terrible, right? What does that do for the morale of our service members overseas that are supposed to be defending our country? It's terrible. The military is a fighting force to defend our country. It's not a social experiment for the Biden administration.
Yeah, it's really unbelievable. And now in the state of Virginia, we did see people begin to course correct here in this last election in 2021. Governor Youngkin won. I mean, he won against all odds. I mean, the state had been slipping left and blueward for a while. And now people in Virginia are like, you know what? Enough of this. No more. The Republicans took back the state House of Delegates. You saw all these other local elections swing the other way. Do you think that hard shift that we saw in November last year carries into November this year?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, look at so Governor Youngkin and the rest, Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears and Attorney General Jason Miyares. I applaud them so much for the things that they accomplished, and they've gone to work day one. Governor Youngkin, made promises that he's living up to, which is great, and that's the kind of governor that we want here in Virginia. And the momentum is moving forward. The progressives and the Democrats aren't doing themselves any favors, right? Considering that they're continuing to politicize our military, continuing to politicize our children with the mask mandates, we see nothing but momentum moving forward. And, for me specifically, Matt, we talked about Spanberger and her kind of mantra that she runs on this national security background and her, again, she's an opportunist. But, I'm going to be able to defeat her easily. At the end of the day, I'm the only person in our race that's the homegrown guy. I spent the first 20 years of my life here. My family lives in this area. And secondly, I'm the only person who's going to be able to go toe-to-toe with her on these national security issues. As I mentioned, Iraq and Afghanistan, I'm the only one that's been there. Third, I'm the only person in our race that's going to be able to go toe-to-toe with her on the policy because I spent a considerable amount of time working for judges, specifically one of the most renowned constitutional judges in the nation, because I understand and appreciate our Constitution. And believe it or not, I know our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, specifically the progressives, they do not believe, but guess what? The words of the Constitution do have meaning. And lastly, and this goes to your point, Matt, I'm a true political outsider. If we saw anything with what happened with Glenn Youngkin, a true Virginian and a true political outsider, I've never run, nor have I never held office, and I'm the only person in my race with that, and I'm proud of it. If there's anything to be said, is that people in Virginia are ready for change, and they're ready for new ideas and a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And my last question for you here, it just seems like, again, with this theme of all these special forces guys stepping up to run, I've never seen anything like this before. There's so many veterans running, and especially special forces veterans. It just seems like everybody, these folks that they have a mentality. It's very Breitbart-esque, by the way. Andrew Breitbart used to say, "Walk towards the fire," right? Like it's like a firefighter running into a burning building or a police officer running towards a gunfire. The special forces guys, they ride to the sound of the guns, right? It just seems like we need a hard course correct as a nation, and they inherently understand it, right? Like they get it that, hey, guess what? This is still the greatest country on the face of the earth in the history of humanity, right? Like in the history of civilization. And we want to keep it that way. And there's certain things we got to do to make sure it stays that way. And it seems like we need that hard course correct as a nation. That's what really seems to be driving this theme.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Matt, all of us have put on the uniform. The Green Berets put on their berets, and we've gone overseas to fight for our country over and over again and over the course of 20 years, right? That's not to say that we can't do that again in a different capacity, right? Our service members mean a lot to us, and our country means a lot to us. And what you're seeing, in my opinion, is a lot of service members and a lot of veterans that are upset with how our country is being run. That's why you see a lot of these special operators, specifically Navy SEALs and Green Berets, jump onto the next mission. We want to get our country back on track, especially after seeing 20 years of sacrifice, blood, sweat, and tears that we've done, and this is what we have the answer for it, right? So for us, it's all about service to our country and making sure our country is the best and strongest country in the world.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Derrick Anderson, sir, where can people go to learn more about you and get involved in the campaign in Virginia's 7th Congressional District if they so choose?
Yeah, Matt. I encourage folks to visit my website to be able to learn a little bit more about me and myself. And, Matt, we all know this, but the progressives up there in Washington, and Abigail Spanberger specifically, are fundraising juggernauts. And this fight is going to be big and it's going to cost money. So I encourage folks, if they can help out with any sort of donation, they can go to my website. It's www.derrickanderson4va.com. That's Derrick, Derrick, Anderson, 4FORVA.com.
Couldn't thank you, sir. Really want to thank you for joining us. Look forward to having you back. Good luck out there. We'll check in again when we get a little closer to primary. Again, folks, Breitbart News Saturday here on Sirius XM 125, the Patriot Channel. I'm